Firstly, thanks to all that are joining us today. I'm sure you're going to be entertained and you're going to have a very good session today. This is our second session in our Sports Professionals in Action series, and this series was set up to allow us to explore a little bit further the successes and achievements of people that are associated with UWS, either as graduates or through their professional careers. We're also very interested in exploring with these individuals the attitudes, behaviours and their daily activities that have all added up to allowing them to be very successful on the world stage. And today we are very grateful and thankful to be joined by Kirsty Gilmour, a world-ranked badminton player, a UWS graduate, and a multiple majors championship medalist. So you're going to be entertained, and we're going to learn a lot here. And I'm going to pass it over, and we have a lovely introductory video here to give you a little bit of background on Kirsty before the interview starts. So thank you and enjoy today.
Flying the flag as the winner. Congratulations to the top seed, Kirsty Gilmour. So the presentation ceremony then, the last of the day, just to get underway here, and look at that. She is relieved and joyous, as are most of the partisan Scottish fans around this part of Glasgow. Delight, and it's just been a terrific tournament for Kirsty Gilmour.
The President, Ian Campbell, is to hand the trophy over to the 2017 Scottish Open Badminton Grand Prix Women's Singles Champion, Kirsty Gilmour!
What a way to cap off the year for Kirsty Gilmour. 2017 Scottish Open Grand Prix champion. Lovely, beaming smile. She's worked so hard.
Thanks, Sharon. That was great. We'll just pass on to Hayley, who's going to kick off our interview with Kirsty. Thank you both.
Hi everyone, and hi Kirsty, welcome along today. Thanks for taking the time to do this. I'm sure you've probably had some recuperation after the weekend.
A little bit, not as much as you would think, but yes, back at it. Just I'm in the office next door to all of our training courts, so I've got some skills to do this afternoon, but happy to be with you guys.
Great. Okay, is that the session plan on the board behind you?
I think this is Badminton Scotland's pathways plan, actually. So about your no, actually you can look at it.
Yeah. This is how they're going to create the next Kirsty Gilmour. Is this the plan? And
Quite literally, yeah. It's a massive part of what we're trying to do at Badminton Scotland. With like, I always hear the stat thrown around that badminton's the second highest participation sport after football, with like 200,000 people playing badminton. But we are actually trying to look at how do we take all of those kind of like hobby players and like maybe build them into something. So yeah, that's what that whiteboard is about, I think.
Okay, perfect. So I mentioned about the weekend, so in case people don't know, so Kirsty won a title at the weekend, so at the Lux Badminton Open, I might be saying it wrong. Kirsty won a title at the weekend, and I suppose it's a great way to start is by asking you about your experiences of the matches that you played at the weekend, and tell us a bit about that title.
Yeah, that tournament used to be called Bitburger, which was a lot easier to say, but yeah, now it's Lux. So yeah, I mean, we had the Denmark Open a couple of weeks ago, and some of the first rounds were quite unexpected, just kind of people that maybe wouldn't normally be in a draw, but because of current climate, maybe some of the Asian players didn't come across. But lo and behold, I got drawn against the world number 2. So that was tough, but I had a really good set and just lost her 21-19. So I was disappointed but quite happy with that performance. And then this last week in Germany, really tried to build on that, and I had a tough. I was seeded 3 for this tournament, and I had a tough first round draw. So I kind of went in with like finals nerves, and I kind of held on to them in all of my rounds. So I started on Wednesday, and we just play one match each day. So yeah, and I kind of did it the hard way. In the semi-final, I had Carolina Marin, who's from Spain. She is 3-time world champion, current Olympic champion. I think our head-to-head before this week was 6-1 in her favour. But I managed to dismiss her in 2 straight sets, so that felt pretty good. And then managed to keep that quality into the final and beat Yvonne Lee from Germany. So I was just super happy with how I played last week. Just really, really happy.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds fantastic. So you beat the Olympic champion, you've beat some adversaries, and I suppose, what do you think has gone into beating them? So what was different about the weekend? What allowed you to pull off those victories?
To be honest, I always know how much I benefit from a training block, and I realised that that's not, it was a kind of forced training block, and it wasn't ideal, but to have had 10 weeks to actually put in back-to-back training has always done me like the world of good. And so we were off court, I'm sure we'll like come on to that later, but we were off court from March 23rd, March 20th, really, like the Friday, until July 13th. It was like 4 months, and that's the longest I've not played badminton since I was 4 years old. So yeah, then we got back on court, and then I was able to put in all these like good back-to-back weeks, and everyone just came back with like a kind of new sense of like just love for badminton and like work ethic, and I like put in some really good work in those 4 months that I was off court with like shadow practice and stuff. So just being able to not be buzzing around all over the world, 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, 2 weeks home, 2 weeks away, and just to be in one place and just head down training, I think that's really what led to like a good week last week.
I mean, it's something we keep hearing a lot about, people talking about realizing the things that they don't need in their life and simplifying their lives. So maybe like less travel, less of a busy life. It sounds like it's served you quite well. And I suppose thinking about those 4 months, how does people think of athletes as having extraordinary sort of software and psychological capabilities? So how did you cope with those 4 months? How were they mentally for you?
No other word other than tough. So Monday morning, 9 a.m. on the 23rd of March, when we all went into lockdown, we had like a full squad Zoom meeting, and already in place, Sport Scotland, or the Institute of Sport coaches, our conditioning coaches, and our on-court badminton coaches had a twice a day session plan which was kind of like shadow badminton, fast feet, core, bike work, home workout, home gym stuff, 30 minutes of reading a day, video analysis. Everyone was complaining about being bored in lockdown, and I was like, apart from the commuting to training, I'm like just as busy. So like the support that we had from Badminton Scotland and from the Institute of Sport was incredible. And honestly, if I look back and like think about how I managed to like get up and motivate myself to do like a individual shadow session, I don't know how I did it, but I did it. It just got into like a kind of routine of like, it has to be done, just has to be done. So yeah, and then I think honestly, when we got back on court on like July 13th, it was like Christmas morning. I've not felt like pure excitement, like pure like childlike excitement for such a long time, because I'd had like a pretty tough 2019. I just really couldn't find my groove. Nothing was really going very well. So having a pretty sad time, to be honest. And so just even stepping away from the court for that little bit was kind of did me the world of good, and getting back on court, I was absolutely buzzing. So yeah.
And what were you looking forward to the most? So when you knew that time was coming to go back to like the National Training Centre, like what were you looking forward to? What aspects of badminton did you miss the most?
Well, everyone thinks I'm such like a lone wolf singles player. I love being by myself and everything, but I couldn't wait to train with people again. I couldn't wait to be around people and like kind of bounce off people, because like it's just so difficult doing it by yourself. There's no one to hold you accountable. If you skim a set off, not that I did, but if you want to, you can, and there's just no one, like it's just all up to you, and then you don't have that kind of challenging environment. So I just wanted to get back to that. I wanted to train with people and train against people, and actually get back to playing my sport and doing my job was a massive part of it as well.
Sure. And kind of, I suppose, what did you learn from the experience? Like, we've all kind of had a slower pace of life. Did it allow you to kind of reflect on like where you are in the world, and in terms of badminton, but generally, did you slow things down, and did it allow you to stop and kind of take stock almost?
Yeah, definitely, and just like kind of made me realize how much I don't stop in in normal life, or what was normal life before, and how I would just have no problems with playing a tournament in Germany, coming home, going to club matches 2 days later in Denmark, and just living out a suitcase and living out of a bag, and all those kind of things. I just get on a roll with it. I did the maths for 2018 and for 2019, and both years worked out about like 6 months home, 6 months away, in kind of 2 to 3 week installments, and that was like a major part of just my down 2019 year, was just living out of a bag. And it sounds amazing, and parts of it are amazing, just like living in hotel rooms and not having to do washing up and changing bed sheets. That's actually really nice. But just not have like, everything felt temporary, and to actually get the chance to spend time with like with my niece, who's about to turn 2, and my family. We couldn't like physically be together, but just to be around and know that you're 20 minutes away from each other, not 8 hours away from each other, is just really nice. And I've kind of learned not to take that for granted, really.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it sounds like what you were saying about going back into playing badminton, and then talking about family and sort of social influences. It sounds like they're so important. I mean, no athlete exists alone, but I suppose, can you tell us about the importance of sort of training partners and the importance of your family in allowing you to, travel internationally and be an international athlete?
Yeah, well, first of all, in regards to like training partners and like the training setup, we've got like a nice little. It's a small group of singles players. I think we've got 7 singles players, but we're a really good group, and I've got some boys to play against, which is always pretty handy. It's always nice being a lady singles player. You can always just grab a boy and let's go for a set. So in terms of like actual training, like setups, we're pretty good, and we've got a good coach, probably the best coach I've ever worked with in terms of just like communication. He might be like the most empathetic man I've ever met, and he'll make a point of just going round the hall and making sure everyone's doing okay. Some days he'll push you, some days he'll be like, I don't think you need to be pushed today. And then that ties into the support that we have from the Scottish Institute of Sport. I've been in the Institute since I was 13, I think, which wasn't yesterday. And I've seen like the development in especially like mental health and well-being, especially in the last 5 years. We are given so many opportunities to notify someone, a member of the support staff, if there's anything that we want to talk about, and that's a very new thing, but it's absolutely key to developing athletes. And this is the support staff that I have right now is probably the best team I've ever worked with, in terms of how they all communicate with each other. It doesn't feel like lots of individuals. It feels like just one big helpful group. And then in terms of off-court stuff and like my friends and family and things, the lovely thing is that they do care about my badminton, don't get me wrong, but it's not like we talk about it, but I like to not talk about it sometimes. I like to be Kirsty, not the badminton player, because I've done that for the 8 hours during the day. So if I'm off court, sometimes I like to not be Kirsty, the badminton player. It's all very Troy Bolton, High School Musical, okay? Not just the basketball guy.
Well, do you know what I was going to say? I'm obviously in reading around you before the interview. One thing I noticed was that your dad was obviously involved in badminton, and you mentioned that your mum was as well. So could you tell us about how you got into badminton, and then probably are they not in badminton anymore? And then is that easy now to not have conversations about badminton when you're in your family home?
Yeah, well, my mum does like to mention that, like it when I mention that she played badminton, because I used to just mention like my dad and my uncle. So my dad was used to be a national junior coach for under 15s. My uncle was an international player, got 50 plus caps for Scotland. And then my mum won the Scottish Schools mixed doubles. So not exactly an international player, but was definitely still involved with the sport. And then even on my mum's side, everyone thinks it's my dad's side that's the like kind of performance badminton. But my mum's cousin went to the Atlanta Olympics for badminton for Canada. So we've actually got a badminton Olympian on that side of the family too. So yeah, it was my dad coached me until I was about 11, until I was beginning to kind of be a stroppy teenager and was like, oh, shut up, Dad. And then my uncle took over my coaching, and then I started going to the Glasgow School of Sport as well. So there was a gradual kind of handover of badminton knowledge, I guess, from my dad and then my uncle. And my mum's never really tried to be involved or anything, but I would get to kind of 15, 16, and my dad would still try to kind of analyze my games and things. But yeah, he's stopped that now. Quite so much, but there's yeah, I've always just been like around sport. If I wasn't in badminton, I would have been doing another sport, definitely. It was just, some people grow up in like kind of music households, some people grow up in academic households. Mine was just a sport household. We were just encouraged to run about in any way that you wanted to, and badminton stuck.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes you obviously working in the sort of academic sport side of things, sometimes we read about families who are interested in sport and maybe they push the child too far, or we read about parents that are living through their children, and sometimes that can turn children away. But it sounds like, if anything, it was a really supportive environment and it made you want to be, you know, part of that badminton pathway. So can you tell us about, you know, growing up in that kind of badminton household? Was it just like, you know, you had a racket in your hand from the age of 2, and, you know, how did you develop and find that love of badminton with your family?
It wasn't 2, okay, it was like 3 or 4, but yes, I had a racket in my hand pretty early.
You're a late developer.
Yeah, I know. But saying that, like, if I'd wanted to, I pretty much made the decision between badminton or football. If I'd wanted to do football, that would have been absolutely okay. If I wanted to do no sport, that would have been okay. But I mean, I've pretty much tried them all. I went through a karate phase, basketball phase, football, some badminton, a little bit of tennis, bit of swimming, but I'm too leg heavy, just sink, and swimming's not for me. Early mornings as well. But like, saying that, my sister played as well until she was kind of like high school age, and then a crippling fear of crowds kind of nipped that in the bud for her. So and now she's a midwife, so she took her own path, and yeah, sport was definitely encouraged but not pushed. We were always encouraged to do like after school clubs. But even if I'd wanted to do kind of more art related after school clubs, my other uncle was an art teacher. So yeah, it was just a positive sport environment rather than a pushy sport environment, for sure.
Yeah, it certainly sounds it. And being involved in all those different sports that you mentioned, do you think they contributed to then selecting badminton and contributed to what you could do within badminton?
Definitely, yeah. I think even to this day, I will rely on my like physical abilities. Some players are just like they rely on their skills to get them out of tricky situations. Some people rely on their tactics and their ability to execute those tactics. I will just run someone into the ground, and I think that comes from having done football, gymnastics. I can get into those positions. All sorts. Yeah, I think just picking and choosing all these kind of attributes, and then badminton was the one that kind of encompassed all of them. I can use all of them. You have to be fast, you have to be strong, you have to make good decisions, you have to be flexible, you have to be powerful, but you also have to be able to do all of that for an hour and 15 minutes. So it was just kind of like the perfect like encompassing of all the physical things. So the School of Sport kind of came along for high school when I was 11, and that's when I kind of, all the other sports fell away, and I just concentrated on badminton. So that was like my decision point. It didn't really feel like a decision at the time. It was just like, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. So yeah.
So it's good to hear you mention Glasgow School of Sport. So it's someone that we work with quite closely. We do some research with Glasgow School of Sport at UWS. And I suppose that decision point that you talked about, when you were at the point of getting into Glasgow School of Sport, was it then that you had to decide, right, it's badminton? And then when you were at Glasgow School of Sport, did you still manage to fit in other sports, or did it become purely about the badminton training and competing?
Yeah, I think at that point it really did just become badminton. But like I say, I didn't feel like I was losing other things. I didn't feel like I was missing out on other things. Because obviously they're quite aware that they're taking in kids like 10, 11-year-old kids. So it can't just be like, we're just doing performance sport now, you're just going to do badminton. They're so aware of making it engaging, fun, safe, and like a positive environment, not a pressurized environment. But there's also, in the same breath, those expectations that you manage your schoolwork and your training. But they give you every opportunity to do that. So in first and second year, you do 8 hours of School of Sport training mixed in with your school curriculum. Third and fourth year, it's 10 hours, and you only do 6 standard grades instead of the typical 8. It was standard grades back in my day. And then you do 3 hires instead of 5 hires each of your 5th and 6th year. So it is up to you how well you use that balance, but you are afforded the opportunity to do that. No one's expecting you to carry a full academic load and a full sports load without imploding. And I would be really interested to see what support they have in terms of like mental health and stuff now. Actually, it wasn't a huge conversation when I was at school 10 years ago. So yeah, I'd like to see if they've actually developed on from that, because I think it could be really useful to the kids now. But I used to go from school training, and then in terms of trying to fit in other sports, pretty much 3 of my weeknights were going across to Scotland and doing national squad training as well. So there wasn't a lot of time to fit in any extracurriculars.
Yeah, sure. I think in terms of Glasgow School of Sport, it's good that you reflect on that and mention, you know, the importance of sort of mental health and psychology. And I think they do have 2 or 3 sports psychology professionals that do support the young people in there now. Certainly I've worked in there in the past, and it's a great setup to allow someone of school age to specialise and to achieve what you want to achieve. I'm just going to pick a question out. We've got a question from Samir, and he mentions Kirsty reflects on how she transitioned over the last 13 years. He would like to get your take on your support network and how it's changed and evolved. So I suppose we've talked about more recently, and we've talked about Glasgow School of Sport, but he's interested in how that has prepared you and shaped you. So in terms of your support network, Kirsty, how's that changed?
It has and it hasn't. In one way, I have had more head badminton coaches than I think any other player that I know, which is good because it allows like kind of fresh start and like a new engagement with a new person, but also it gives you limited opportunity to work on these new things that are being brought to the table and really to ingrain them and make them automatic within your game. It's all very well doing them in training, but it probably takes about a year to 2 years for them to solidify and then come out and be habitual in like pressurized panic situations. So that's presented challenges, but it's also been good. But hopefully with our new coach Ingo, he started in like mid 2019. He's not really new anymore. But hopefully with Ingo, we're just on the same page about so many things. So hopefully I can get a really good run with Ingo. It doesn't look like he's going anywhere, so that's good. And then in terms of our other support staff, we've had a few S&C coaches over the years, which is, we only have engagement with them, or in the past we've only had kind of like, we'll engage with them twice a week for our weights and our conditioning. But in recent years, especially in this last mad year, the engagement, like I say, the engagement and the communication between the institute support staff and the badminton on court coaches has been incredible. And just to not have that disconnect between those two, like this is what you're working on in the gym, this is what we're doing on court. If your badminton coach says you're going to do like an endurance block on court, and then your gym coach is like, oh, we're in a power phase, that's not helpful. So like the communication between all of the support staff has been so good in the last couple of years. And then in the sense that it doesn't change, the doctor that did my entry medical into Glasgow School of Sport, John McLean, I still see him to this day, and a few of the physios I still work with, so that's been, you know, pushing 13 years or something like that. So there's all these kind of like people that are in sport and they're just so knowledgeable, and then there's the other kind of support staff that kind of cycle through and change. So I think I've got a really good balance of people that I've known forever, and then the opportunity to work with like new people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what it's probably making us realise is we've got the athlete at the centre, and then how many people support an international athlete, an athlete at your level. So you've mentioned strength and conditioning coaches, you've mentioned coaches who would be like your badminton coaches, you've mentioned physiotherapists, doctors. So the number of support staff that actually support an international athlete, and probably critically what you've said is about them all communicating with each other, so knowing your training load, how much training you're doing, when a competition is coming up, and that sounds like something that's got better and better from what you've described in terms of their communication together.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say only in this kind of last year, I've really started to take notice of like the data and the science of the sport. Like I didn't do sports science at university, not even close. I think if I did more sport, I would have gone a bit nuts. So I did filmmaking and screenwriting. So I've never really been involved in like sports science at an academic level. So to now, I really have started being interested in our training loads. So after every single session, we fill in the RPE scale. We break it down into like we did 20 minutes at a 7 out of 10, 40 minutes at a 6 out of 10, 30 minutes at a 5 out of 10. Break it down like that, you get a training load at the end of it. And especially coming back from lockdown, we did that the whole way through lockdown as well. Returning to court, you never, week to week, you never want to deviate plus or minus by about 20%, or it's an injury risk. And plus I've started using like heart rate monitors more regularly, so just I've become like a little bit of a numbers geek of late, and I really find it good. Before, when I was younger, I just used to run around and do what I was told, but I think my ability to bring the knowledge of what I need. I got described as a young athlete the other day. I was delighted with that. I'm 27 now, so I wouldn't say I'm no plans to retire anytime soon, but I would say I was at the latter end of my career, and only now am I kind of like really starting to take notice of the data and see what it can do in terms of like efficiency of training, because I feel like niggles almost every week in various parts of my body, so whatever I can do to not get consistently injured, I'm gonna like kind of keep a closer eye on these days. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right, like the data is such a big part of any sport now, and I suppose, is it a maturity thing? So you kind of describe yourself as being at the later end of your career, but is it because your career started so early? So going to Glasgow School of Sport at 11, did you go to your first major games at 17?
Yeah, I just turned 17. I was 2 weeks and just turned 17.
Okay, so does it feel like you've been around a while, I suppose? So you're not really that old, not compared to some of us, but does it feel like you've been around a while? And then I suppose the second part of the question is about how you're using that data to better understand yourself. So using things like, do you monitor sleep as well? Are you monitoring diet and all those types of things? And does that then feed into that sports science support system to tell them when to back off and when you're ready to train hard?
Yes, definitely. We do monitor sleep as well. So every morning we will fill in our wellness diary. So we've got sleep hours, sleep quality, illness and injury, soreness, energy level, fatigue, how often in the last 24 hours have you felt worried, anxious or stressed, and then our heart rate value and our sleep charge from our watches as well. This is what I mean, like this is a relatively new thing, maybe in the last 2 years. I've filled that out every single day for the last 2 or 3 years. And the thing, we've tried to do it in the past, but like I say, just the breakdown of communication between the support staff, and if people aren't looking at what I'm filling in, why the hell am I wasting my time in filling it in? It's not an exercise for me. I know how I feel. It's so that it can be consistently tracked by the on-court coaches, the S&C coaches, the physios, and even the sports psychologists and the doctors. Everyone can see that that data. So yeah, and I think it is definitely a maturity thing. I think especially when you get the opportunity. So I've done all my university, I've done all my education, and now I'm a full-time professional athlete. So I have the time and the concentration to be able to channel all of my energy into, it's just so selfish, but all of my energy into me and how my body is and how well I'm eating, how well I'm sleeping. And you don't always get it perfect, but to have literal numbers to go with it, to like kind of correlate and track trends of this is how you are, this is how your data looks always after a tournament, and something I might not have noticed. But yeah, I was going to say something else. No, I can't remember. But yes, I can't remember the rest of the question.
Just no, there was a few really good points that you made there, but I'm going to go into one sort of example, maybe a little bit deeper, if you can explain to us. So you are giving all this information back to various people, so you're presuming that various people are looking at it in your sports science team. So you mentioned sports psychologists, for example. Can you give us an example of how, when you've put that data in, then maybe one of the sports science support team has came to you, so they've been proactive and said to you, okay, Kirsty, we've looked at your data and we think you should be doing this. So maybe a sports psychology example, or a strength and conditioning example. So can you show us how that feedback actually works in practice?
Yeah, so I can give you an example of it not working, and I can give you an example of it working. Not working, I think, was the 2013 World Championships. It was my first World Championships in China, and my doubles partner got horrendously sick and recorded a 2 out of 10 for well-being because she was throwing up in the toilet. And we're supposed to get an immediate email to say, do you want a doctor's appointment? Nothing happened, nothing came through, nothing was flagged, nothing pinged, and that system just kind of tailed off. But now, 2 weeks ago, I recorded a 5 for kind of stress and anxiety, just because I had a really bad night's sleep. I know there are a lot of men involved in this chat, but my period was late and I just was feeling so anxious, and just that like emotional somewhere between your tummy and your chest, just ball of TV static, and you just wake up angry one of those days. And so I filled that in at 7:30 when I got up, filled in my COVID questionnaire, got into the hall, and my coach Ingo was like, you feeling okay today? I saw your numbers, what's up? And it's just that immediate, I don't have to come in and sit my coach down and be like, here, listen, this is what's going on. It's an opportunity it's so much easier to raise these concerns when someone asks you, rather than you having to go over to someone and be like, hey, can we have a conversation? So it just helps spark the conversation. I think that's the main thing. I think that's the real main thing about filling in a form.
Yeah, and it sounds like it can be a catalyst for someone to pick up on what's going on within you, and you might not think to mention it because you're just coping with these things. But you mentioned your coach there again, and I'm interested to chat about that relationship in a bit more depth. So we've got some students on who are master's sports coaching students, who are, professional coaches themselves, and I'm interested in, you mentioned that your coach was hugely empathic. He sounds like he's intuitive to your needs. Can you tell us about that sort of coach-athlete relationship? Can you characterize it for us?
Yeah, I would say he is very intuitive in general, but these kind of these questionnaires and wellbeing diaries that we fill in just help with the intuition. You can tell when someone's not on top form one day, but when you get an email to say they're definitely not on form, it helps with that that communication. I talk a lot about communication just because I in the past I haven't realized there's been communication breakdowns, because you just, like, human nature, you just kind of let things go. If it's not the most important thing, it's kind of, just grumbles on the background. But I have so many more difficult conversations now, but it makes me less stressed rather than more stressed, just to lay everything out on the table. And in terms of day-to-day coaching with Ingo, one thing I've learned from him is when my training partner's maybe not having a good day, I would maybe tend towards the harsher side of like just get your head down and just get back in the zone, just do whatever you can to get back in the zone. Whereas Ingo will maybe wait until the exercise is over and we sit down at our very socially distanced chairs, don't worry, and he will just kind of like have a chat with them rather than just fly into military style, come on, this isn't good enough, you've got to pull up your socks, which I've definitely experienced in the past. So just having that, like a coach that knows when to, if you're in the middle of an exercise and it's just like a physical thing and you just have to be like, you just need encouragement, you just need motivation, you just need to know people are in your corner, then absolutely just like shout stuff at them. But when someone's clearly mentally not engaged one day, maybe there's an athlete that would need just a little shake and then they can get going. But in the same breath, maybe a different athlete or that same athlete on a different day, all they need is you okay today? What's up? And then maybe they just get it off their chest and we roll on, or maybe they get it off their chest and, you know, maybe today is not the day to push this, which is, it happens less often because quite often you're halfway through a session, you're like, do you know what, I'm here now, let's just keep going, let's get the best out of this session. Maybe it's still utter terrible at the end, but let's just get the absolute best out of this session. So yeah, 2 ways to push an athlete, I'd say.
And it sounds like from listening to you speak, it sounds like, I mean, you have so much resilience and mental toughness that even on a bad day, you're just like, let's get the training done. Does that concern you in people that you train with? Like, you know, when people are having a bad day, do you need to get something from them as well? And therefore, do you need to have that empathy yourself? So you need to encourage them to train well in order that you've got, you know, a good hitting partner.
Yes, definitely. And again, that's something that I've kind of seen my own behaviours change, and maybe about the last year, from being quite the other person, just like, because I've always struggled with, so from quite a young age I was the top singles player in the squad, top lady singles player in the squad, certainly, and now I'd maybe be the top singles player in the squad because we have an outrageously young squad. Running joke that I'm the oldest by 3 years, and then there's Adam, who's a doubles player, Julie, who's a doubles player, and then the next oldest singles player is probably about 5-6 years younger than me. So I've been kind of the team leader since I was about 24, I want to say. So I've always been told to kind of be, I don't want to use the word a bitch, but more kind of headstrong in training, and kind of, if you need something done, just you tell the other person that you need this done, you need it better. And I've really tried to force that into my training and my training environment and my training mindset, but it does not come naturally to me to confront someone and you know, kind of nag them to get something out of them. But now I'm obviously starting to see that there's a different way to kind of coax a better performance out of someone. So I'll be more likely just to either give Ingo a nudge and say, they're not great today. I don't think it's my place to call out another player for not being good that day. I think that promotes a kind of a training environment with friction. And I've also struggled with kind of, in the past, I've also been encouraged to be encouraging of who I'm training with as well, and kind of motivate them and help them with things, which I do definitely try to do. But some days I only have enough energy for myself, and I don't think that should specifically come down to the athlete. I think that should be, it's a gradual thing, but I think it's a atmosphere that's built within the training as a whole, from coaches down to players. I don't think players necessarily, sometimes, I don't know, it's hard because sometimes I only have enough energy to get myself through a training session, and if someone's like, no, part of your responsibility is to get them through a training session, which I do agree with, team atmosphere, but not every day, I don't think.
Yeah, I suppose you're a singles player at the end of the day, so, and like you say, I think there is a certain amount, I think you termed it selfishness, but there needs to be, doesn't there, to get what you need out of training and to be a little bit cutthroat in terms of being in a very demanding environment. One of the things I wanted to ask you about next was, so you mentioned Glasgow School of Sport earlier, and then obviously you came to UWS and studied creative industries practice. And as part of that, you were a UWS sports scholar. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about how that scheme supported you and the support that it provided whilst you were at UWS.
Yeah, it was a real, it came just at the right time actually, because it was kind of somewhere where I was, maybe I wasn't like established senior athlete yet, and so I wasn't making a huge amount of money from tournaments or sponsors. I was on GB funding, but that's kind of helps with living costs. It's not necessarily like a for profit. So it came along right at the right time just to help cover tournament costs and stuff. To keep me focused on these two major aspects of my life and not have to build in a third one or a fourth one, trying to do coaching and I don't know, a part-time job or something like that, stringing maybe. So in terms of just all these little bits that add up, it was just another element of support that I had from the university that allowed me to be more of a full student and a full athlete, full-time athlete. So yeah, it was pretty impactful.
Okay, and in terms of managing your studies as well, so you decided to come to university, and did it help you sort of manage your studies and tell us a little bit about your studies, and has that got any linkage with your career in badminton?
Maybe it will in the future, but no, I think it's genuinely helped me. Before major games, before Commonwealth Games and Olympic Games, we get media training, but I think just doing, so my course started as filmmaking and screenwriting, and I did my first year full time, and then just as I was starting second year, looked at my timetable and I was like, oh, I'm going to miss 8 out of my 12 Friday lectures because I've got tournaments. So I'm going to miss 3/4 of this module. And my lecturer was like, sorry, I can't have that. And I was like, understandable. So I switched to being part-time, and that's when it changed to being creative industries practice, but I kind of tried to keep it, I could choose my modules then, and I tried to keep it to the filmmaking and screenwriting modules and more of the kind of theory ones, because the practical ones were kind of more time consuming, and I wouldn't be able to like work around training as well. So that's how that worked. And going part-time was actually, I think, really important. So it took me 4 years instead of 3 to get my bachelor's. But I mean, that was ideal. All I wanted from going to, I knew if I took a year out after high school before I went to university, I was never going to go to university. I would have just been like, badminton's for me, see ya. So I'm so glad I just went straight in, hit the ground running, in with university. And I do think it has helped me with, again, communication, but just like people say like I can do post-match interviews comfortably. It's not an extra layer of stress because I know what's involved in setting up the camera, interviewing someone, what you want from an interviewee. As you can see from this Zoom call, I use my hands too much. My friends get me to hold a water bottle after my matches, and even then it's going everywhere. So I think it's helped me in terms of that. And then I did my work experience with BBC, and that's provided me with good links and connections there, and I'm kind of more of a regular on radio and stuff like that. So it's kind of given me that little bridge between sports journalists and sports, and to see what goes into both industries is really, really interesting. And again, I don't have any immediate plans to stop badminton, but I definitely plan to use my degree in some sense after badminton, because badminton's definitely not forever, unfortunately.
Okay, great answer. We'll look forward to seeing you reporting on various sports on the BBC quite soon. Great. You've got that, generic sports background, so I'm sure you could pick up, you'll be doing the golf next on the BBC. You'll be doing the commentating on the Ryder Cup or something.
Absolutely, send me to Augusta. That's fine.
You never know. But you mentioned there in the course of your answer, obviously you mentioned about the Olympic Games, and it's something obviously we want to hear about, getting to go to an Olympic Games and competing at an Olympic Games, and then of course the Commonwealth Games prior to that. Can you talk around those major games that you've been to most recently? Tell us about those experiences. Are they the highlights of your careers? Were there any unexpected sides to those major games?
Okay, so I've played in 3 Commonwealth Games. Each one of them has been so different from the others. The first one was in 2010. Like I said, I just turned 17, and my goal there was to play as much badminton in a large arena as possible. And I did that. I played singles, doubles, and mixed in the team event and the individual event. It was fine. I did okay, nothing special. Then the next one rolled around in 2014, and obviously it's in Glasgow. And I was 20 because it was slightly earlier in the year, and I found myself second seed. But at that time, I still had that kind of childlike naivety, and I wasn't really like analysing my results and thinking about what points I need to get this seeding position and who my opponents are going to be. I just kind of taken things as they come and just kind of rolling with it, and people seemed to be happy when I was playing, so that must be a good sign. Let's keep doing that. I made one fatal error in the Glasgow Games in that I was on Twitter. So I won the semi-final and guaranteed myself a Commonwealth medal. You have to play off for the bronze, so if you lose the semi, you've still got one to do. So I won the semi-final, was in the final, guaranteed gold, guaranteed silver at least. Made the mistake of going on Twitter and just seeing people be like, "Oh my god, amazing! You're amazing! Like, oh, what a semi! That's amazing!" And I was like, "Stop it!" And I thought I was already amazing, and that kind of took the edge off of the final, and I was kind of already happy with what I'd achieved, and I really wish I hadn't been, because I could have. Michelle, the Canadian girl, had played a really good tournament, but I wish I hadn't already mentally checked out. That's a major regret. And then we had an Olympic Games in 2016, so 2 years after that, silver in Glasgow. But for Rio, so Rio was in the late July, early August. In the April at the Australian Open, I tore the meniscus in my right knee, and so couldn't really get an operation before Olympic Games because it would just be out of the Olympic Games. So if there's something you're going to push through an injury for, it's probably an Olympics. So push through it was really not in a good position, like physical position. I did fine. I was seeded 11, but didn't really live up to that expectation. Got my knee operation pretty soon after, and then was back to full health for 2018 Commonwealth Games. And I got a bronze in the Gold Coast, and it sounds like it is less than silver, but silver is the only medal that you end on a loss in a Commonwealth Games. Yeah. Gold, you've won the tournament. Bronze, you've lost your semi, but then you've won your playoff for that, so you get a celebration. So bronze and gold get a celebration. Silver is fine. So that bronze to me felt better than the silver in Glasgow, even though it was my home crowd, which was amazing. But the bronze and just everything that the pressure that had been on my shoulders, if I didn't get a medal, we didn't have funding for the next 4 years. Quite simply, cut and dry. And I was the only one in a position to get a medal. So yeah, to have the future of the national governing body on your shoulders was interesting. So yes, the bronze, I think, in Gold Coast felt better than the silver of Glasgow, slightly pipped it.
Wow, there are so many things I want to ask you about that. And I'm sure we'll have another conversation another time. I'm going to have to ask you one final question, and then we have lots of questions in the chat I can see popping up. So I'm going to have to not be selfish here and ask you a million questions about those games. But one final thing from me is about, so obviously Tokyo is now supposed to be in 2021. Is that what you're still aiming for? And can you tell us what is your thinking around about that? How do you deal with that postponement?
I've come to be a much more flexible person when it comes to plans. Especially like if you're at tournaments, you've done better than you expected, you got to change flights. You've done worse than expected, you got to change flights. I think everyone thinks athletes live by these like cut and dry rules and like that's how life has to be or we're going to explode. I've learned to just be like take it as it comes and adapt. So the fact that Tokyo was moved to next year was annoying, but could you have imagined if we'd put an Olympic Games on this year? Totally wrong call. I don't think it would have counted as an Olympic Games because I don't think anyone would have gone, to be honest. I think the quality would have been down. I don't think it would have been valid. So like I've come to be quite happy that it's next year. It gives me, like I say, longer to train, longer to get in the best shape of my life, which I feel like I'm probably pretty close to right now. And yeah, we've had to adapt a lot of our training periodization plans, so you coaches will know about that. I just do what I'm told, to be honest. So just apparently this next 3 weeks is going to be horrible for me, but I'll just do it. It's fine. And so yeah, I mean I'm fine that Tokyo's next year. It's slightly strange that it's not like Tokyo 2020 as branded, but yeah, we're rolling with it, rolling with the punches. It's going to be fine.
Okay, I mean, again, psychological flexibility, there's so many things in there, but thank you for answering my questions. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ewan so that some of the people that are listening in get their questions answered.
Thanks, Hayley. Thanks, Kirsty. So we do run out of time quite fast here, but I'll try and go through them quickly as I can. First one from Raleigh, who has picked up on your reflection that a designated block of training attributed to your outstanding performance at the weekend. Has this altered your thoughts in relation to future training competition plans?
Yes, but also I've had that support from my coach literally just the week before I left so like 2 weeks ago. I was halfway through a session and my coach called me over and he just turned his laptop round and it was just like a sea of colours for like the periodization plan, and he's like, so we want to get 3 physical blocks in before Tokyo. So we're going to have one just before Tokyo. We're going to have one before the Europeans, which is in April. So which means when you get back from Germany, it's the only other place that we can put one. So I had about 8 days to get my head around the fact that this next 3 weeks is going to be spew-inducing, which it was almost this morning. It was spicy. So yes, what was the question again?
It was about your plans basically for future training competitions on the back of the weekend's performance?
Yeah, so now I think I'm at the point in my career where I can perhaps prioritize quality over quantity of tournaments. If I can choose them correctly and just hit them with absolute quality and get good solid results at those ones, rather than, so our world rankings works in that it's your 10 best results from this point in the previous year. So it's not like January 1st to December 31st. It's from this week and the previous 52. It's your 10 best results in that time. So you essentially, if you play 10, just 10 tournaments and win them all, that's better than playing 20 tournaments and getting to 10, maybe 10 good results. So I think I'm definitely looking to be more quality over quantity now.
Okay, thank you. Now, Ross has asked the question, I'm probably going to make a mess of this one. He's involved in boccia, is that right? Boccia, B-O-C-C-I-A? Yeah, sorry, I made a mess of that. Sorry, Ross, for Scotland. And he feels he doesn't get many opportunities compared to Great Britain squad. Is that the same for you? Do you get more opportunities once you're in a Great Britain squad? Also, is taking part in competitions only available through the squads, or are there competitions similar to tennis where it's independent and not as a squad?
So for the first part of that question, badminton's in a strange position in that we lost our fund, despite meeting our UK sport set target for Rio of a medal in Olympic Games. We lost our funding. We got completely cut the day I was picking up the keys to my new flat, which was a story for another time. So we just completely got our funding cut, and so we're also in a strange position that we only compete as Team GB for Olympic Games every 4 years and European Games every 4 years, but that only started, we've only had the second European Games. The first one was in Azerbaijan, and then this one was in Minsk. So that's relatively new. So we'll have 3 European Championships, just badminton, and then the 4th year will be a multi-sport European Games, and we'll be Team GB for that. So I don't compete for Team GB often, but there also currently is no GB badminton, so a bit of an odd position. And then the second part of that question, in badminton, everyone is affiliated to their national governing body. You have to be affiliated to Badminton Scotland to compete for Scotland internationally. So all the entries go through governing bodies to BWF, Badminton World Federation. But saying that, yes, you still have to be affiliated in badminton to even play like the East of Scotland, the West of Scotland, the Highlands, the Glasgow and the West tournaments. So yes, we are quite governing body centralised, if that makes sense.
Thanks for that. So there's 2 questions remaining. I'll sort of put them into one if that's okay, from Domenico and Andrew. So do you experience more traditional coaching or more athlete-centred approach when training? And also from Andrew, for the younger players that you train and compete with, what's the key advice and guidance you would provide them in order to achieve the success that you have?
First part, I would say I've had coaches in the past where this is their style of training, get on board or there's going to be friction. Not in a super harsh sense. I don't mean that like you're out the squad, but if you're able to keep up with their training and their expectations of you, you'll be fine. And if not, you're going to have some difficult conversations. But also I've had some coaches where, again, I don't know if it's a maturity thing from my side, I felt confident enough to say, this is what works best for me, this is what has worked best for me in the past, this is what I think I need. And then I do think it's a coach's job to say, you're talking crap, or okay, I agree with that. You don't always need someone to agree with you. That's not what a good coach should be. A good coach should call you out sometimes and be like, oh, you think you should only do 3 sets? No, we're going to be doing 5. You don't need someone to be like, yeah, that's great. You need someone to challenge you mentally and physically. And that is rolling on to what I would say for younger players or younger athletes. There's so many cliches, but they're cliches for a reason. Just you got to become comfortable being in pain and being uncomfortable. If you're not working in that kind of I don't like comfort zone, but I've learned that if I'm not stressed in training, I will be stressed in tournaments. I have to come in to training and almost dread what we're about to do, because I know I've had kind of slight anxiety, panic attacks on court, because I'm like, I can't do this. But you just have to remember that you can, and it's going to be horrible, but it's for a reason, and you're going to improve in that horrible half hour. You're going to improve more in that horrible half hour than if you do something fine for 2 hours and you're just like, oh, that was good, wasn't it? So just always, not always, that's a recipe for disaster, but as often as possible, be uncomfortable and stressed in your training, and it's going to make competitions so much easier.
That's great. Thanks very much. I'll pass back over to Hayley now to wrap up the session. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, thanks so much, Kirsty. You've answered all of our questions so thoroughly, and really giving your honest perspective, and there's so much for us to learn from that. I think we probably need an extra hour to go through some of the things, because your answers are so good, and especially in terms of the psychological element of training, and just that idea of being an elite level athlete, you have to be uncomfortable, don't you? I think that is a really good place to finish. And for students too, if you're not being challenged and being pushed and feeling a little bit confused, then you're probably not learning. So I think that does transcend into the sort of student experience as well. But thanks so much for taking the time out, because I know you probably should be in an ice bath or having a protein shake right now after your hard training session this morning. So thanks for doing it, Kirsty. We really appreciate it, and all the best for the rest of the year.